we have Matt Lukens, who was also with Annette and I, part of the committee that operated the Rhode Island Coalition of Entrepreneurs. As a longtime product guy, I strongly believe in product validation. I believe in understanding the customer story, the customer journey, and knowing what they need. I've seen too many products made that don't go to market with the proper level of customer validation, product validation at the customer level. And I think customer discovery is a huge part of that. Matt is a serial entrepreneur. I believe, I can't count so high, maybe 5 startups or more for Matt. He's led numerous others that he wasn't the founder of. As I understand it, he tried retirement and just didn't like it, so he's back. He has Mansfield Northern, and he delivers customer discovery programs for RIHub. He's actively volunteering his time as well with Venture Mentoring Service, which those of you out there who don't know VMS, which is a part of RIHub, VMS is a wonderful organization where you as an entrepreneur can go out and get advice from seasoned entrepreneurs, and it's free, absolutely free. It's a great service, and you should all be using it if you're not. So with that, it's my great pleasure to introduce Matt Lukens.
Hey everybody, let me share my screen, get this rolling. I appreciate the intro, and give me a minute. And what you should see, right? Okay, you should all now see Customer Discovery and Interviewing RIHub Startup Weekend. Is that what you all see?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's get this puppy going. So I'm Matt Lukens. I'm founder of 5 startups in Rhode Island, senior management in 12 others. And no, at least for me, retiring sucks. So I didn't do that. I was going to put this at the end. I'm going to put it at the front. Shameless plug. I do give the course for RIHub. It's a great course. It's much more comprehensive. This is really a subset of that. Email me or Annette to get additional materials, which you'll see, which are copies of the presentation, customer interview planning guide, customer segmentation framework, customer segment profile, and also a list of 10 10-minute videos on startups that are brilliant and are used by MIT, RIHub, and Steve Blank. So this is really based on the lean startup methodology as advocated by Steve Blank and Bill Ouellette. And there's a great book, which we can also get you the link to, which is called Talking to Humans, which is about interviewing. I'm going to blaze through these first couple of slides. We also use the business model canvas, not in this presentation, but as part of the overall session that we give later on. Why are we here? 90% of all startup ideas fail. VCs, not much better. Why do they fail? Guess what? You build the wrong thing. You build something nobody wants. This is Henry Ford. If I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, so we'd all be breeding instead of driving. So why is that important? It's about customer discovery. It's about reducing the risk of building the wrong thing. That's what this is about. Customer discovery is based on the scientific method, with a little nod to Francis Bacon, Copernicus, and Galileo. Very simply, you formulate a hypothesis. Gee, I think that my customers are going to need this, or I think this is something that people will need. You generate a set of test interviews, you assess, you analyze, and you adjust or pivot the message, and you rinse and repeat. Why do you do this? Because you're trying to fail. You're trying to fail fast, and you're trying to fail by determining what you should change in your concept. If you've ever read Winston Churchill's biographies, he failed all the way almost until the end. This great quote from this. So the essence of customer discovery, now that I can slow down and come out of hyperdrive, what problem are you solving? Who are your customers? It's great to say everybody on the planet is your customer, but that's not a customer segment. It's not somebody you can sell to. You're not going to make money off of that. Even Google didn't start out saying everybody on the planet is going to be my customer. You segment them based upon their unmet needs. And remember, what you're trying to do is you're not trying to deliver features. You're not trying to deliver AI. You're not trying to deliver faster internet. You're trying to say what the benefits are. Why is that customer who I think would want my service, widget, whatever, is going to find a benefit in using this? And you're going to guess. Yes, we're going to guess. And then we're going to test to make sure that our guesses are right, wrong, or indifferent. And then the most important thing is you're going to get out of the building. Well, not anymore. You're going to get into Zoom. And you're going to talk to your customers. And in talking to your customers, you're going to find out, are you building the right thing? Does it need to be pink? Does it need to be red? Does it need to be faster? Does it need to be smaller? Does it need to be larger? You're going to find out the fundamental issues that are going to affect your ability to deliver a product and, oh, by the way, make money, right? You can have the greatest product in the world, and if nobody buys it, it'll go on the shelf. I have a couple over there on my shelves, by the way. So simplistically, where do I find my customers? Today, it's actually much easier to find customers than it has been in the past. You have LinkedIn, you have your contact list, you have Google, you have a lot of different ways to go. One of the things I'd recommend if you're trying to find customers is a service called LinkedIn Navigator. LinkedIn Navigator lets you find the people in a company. If you're doing consumer product, this may not be appropriate, but certainly if you're doing consumer product, there's going to be distribution channels, there's going to be go-to-market channels, and you're going to need to find the people in those companies to talk to. Navigator is free for 30 days. After that, it's around, I think, 79 to 80 bucks a month. If you're doing customer discovery in large volume, it's worth every penny. And sorry about the shameless pitch, but there isn't another tool out there like it. The next thing you should think about is, what advisory boards, what conferences. We may not be going to them now, but there's a rich history on the web of these conferences that you would have gone to last year or the year before. And guess what? They have speakers. And guess what? Those speakers have names and titles and positions and companies. And guess what? You go back to LinkedIn and you can get to these people, leaders in the industry. I will tell you from teaching this course a number of times and teaching other courses that right now, believe it or not, people are responding off of LinkedIn more than they ever have. A year ago, if you put out a LinkedIn invitation, 1 in 10 would get back to you, maybe 2 in 10 if you're lucky. Right now, I recently had someone in my course who was a PhD in chemical engineering, and she wanted to reach out to a display designer at Apple. What are the chances of getting the head of display design at Apple to interview for you? 0, right? Nope. She got the head of display technology at Apple to sit through a 15-minute interview because she reached out on LinkedIn. So don't discount this kind of a method. More, which is really sort of crawling over broken glass, but it's another way to do it, is go to the trade shows that are out there. They're all still there. All the booths are still on the web. You can pick out the companies you might think are competitors or prospects. And of those, you can then go to LinkedIn and Navigator using those companies, find out who's in those companies, and go through the process again. And so there's lots of ways to find the customers that you want to talk to. Making contact, lots of different ways. But most importantly, you're going to be doing customer research while you're doing this. You're going to find out how long that person has been with the company. You're going to find out what they're head of. You might even find out that they're following a soccer team or a football team, something you can use to make an emotional contact when you talk to them later on. LinkedIn or email, then follow up with a phone call and ask for 15 to 20 minutes. By the way, I had somebody ask me, so after 15 minutes, do we have to end the interview? No. What you're trying to do is you're trying to engage this person, as we'll see later on, and find out what's important to them. And if you manage to do that, it'll be a lot longer than 15 to 20 minutes. Ideally, it's going to be in half an hour. It can even be an hour. And always remember, when you're done with an interview, ask, do you mind if I have further questions? Can I contact you again or call you again? So let's talk about effective questioning. In terms of effective questioning, again, what we're trying to do is engage the emotional side of your prospect's brain. Because if you engage the quant side of your prospect's brain, they're going to give you one-word answers. They're going to go, yes, no, 10. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to find out what they do in their daily life. You're trying to understand, what's important to them. You want to be asking them about what processes they are involved in. You want to ask them about what actions they are taking and why they take them and what's important to them. You're trying to ask, what and how questions and why questions. You're not trying to say, so in your opinion, or do you think? You're asking for concrete information about what's important to them. Do not talk tech unless they ask for it. And if they ask for it, try and delay it to the end of the interview. If they're really interested in your tech, the longer you make them wait, the more interested they will be. I know, at least early in my career, I was severe techie, and all I wanted to do was talk speeds and feeds. And at the end of the day, I used to lose audiences right and left, as both Pat alluded to and Shannon alluded to. Don't ask leading questions. Do you think it should be red or blue? Because what you'll get is you'll get the answer that that you're leaning towards from them. When you try and formulate your questions, what you need to be doing is you need to be keeping in mind, what are you testing? I want you to sit down, and before you go into an interview, I want you to sit down and plan that interview. And if you ask Annette, she'll have copies of interview planning. In a lot of people bridle at that. In terms of interview planning, if you keep in mind what your hypothesis is and what are you testing, you will get the answers you're looking for, and you'll be able to synthesize that into what you need to build or how you need to modify your product. I would also recommend, if at all possible, if there's a team and it's not an individual, set up the interview on Zoom or Skype or Teams or whatever your video of choice is, and tell the person that you have a team member with you and they're going to be taking notes. Show the team person as there, and then have them either go off screen or blank their screen, or put up their initials. Because at the end of the interview, when you're done, you and the other team member can sit down and analyze the interview, and you'll pull a lot more out of it than you would otherwise. An example of questions to ask here is, rather than what role does cost play in your decision making? And the answer is, of course, it plays a role in everybody's decision making, even if you're specifying a gold toilet for the Air Force. Is lower cost important to you? And you may find out that they go, well, no, not really. We don't buy from the lowest bidder. We're more concerned about the ability to deliver on time. Questions that you can ask customers. What is your role and responsibility? You should already know that, but you want them to tell you what it is, because it may have changed. You also want to know, how long have they been with the company? Who do they report to? You don't call the CEO first. You may get a hold of the CEO and say, who should I talk to? But at the end of the day, don't try and interview the CEO. Try and find a vice president, try and find a director, a head of engineering, a product engineer, project engineer, head of paving, I don't know. and find out who they report to. Find out what their area of expertise is. What processes are they using? More importantly, find out what their future looks like. You may have the best thing on the planet for them today, and you may want to sell that to them. You may find out that in 1 year they're going to obsolete that entire process and use something else, and you won't know it, and you'll never be able to get that person as a customer. More examples about how you can question is everybody likes challenges. Everybody likes to tell you how they solved a problem. Engage them in telling you what they do, how they did it, and what they are proud of. Where are the areas that they think, gee, if we only did it a different way, it's going to make a significant difference for them? That may be the difference that you can make for them. There's also the infamous magic wand trick. This is about comparing and contrasting question. It was part of a case study that I did. A company had a GPS tracking vest, and all the premier soccer leagues in Europe were already using it. Unfortunately, the company who was producing the GPS tracking vest for soccer players to analyze their performance were capped out. All the Premier League teams had bought them. Their sales had stalled. They didn't know where to go. So obviously the next thing to do was, well, where do we go? Well, if the Premier League teams have already bought it, then maybe we'll go to the national teams, which is like going to college football in the US instead of the NFL, because all the NFL teams have already bought this GPS tracking vest. And so in going to the national teams, they had a situation where everybody already knew what this product did. So what we tried to do here was we tried to, first of all, ask the coaches, what were they missing? But that's not the question that we really wanted to ask. Again, we wanted to personalize that. We wanted to say, how has your job as national coach been impacted by not having access to the GPS device? Because again, they all already knew what it did and knew how it would benefit them. And you could get them to think about how it would benefit them and how they would use it and engage them in an emotional conversation to get the information that we needed for that. Then we used the famous magic wand question. But again, this is very dry. What functionalities would you like added to the device? This is a speeds and feeds question in disguise. So what we did instead was, I have a magic wand. What are the two things that you would like to change to make your job, again, the thing that's important to you, different and better? The things I want you to remember to do is don't talk tech. If you ask somebody what they want, they will say everything. They will tell you all of the things that they want, and they'll give you a list of 1,000 nice to haves. And I will tell you, one gotta have beats 1,000 nice to haves every time. And you're in search of the I've gotta have it, not the gee, it'd be nice if I had it. And last but not least, believe it or not, don't sell. This is your time to develop a personal relationship with this person who you have on the other end of the phone. The moment you come out guns blazing about the AI in the cloud with the SRT, transport and the NDI video, you're done. You're not going to get any more substantive answers that are going to tell you what you need to know out of this person. And if they see you coming and trying to sell, they'll disengage emotionally. I actually had one person who is a very good salesperson fight with me in my last session for RIHub about this, saying, no, you can't do it. And I said, you've got to try this. He came back to me after 4 interviews. He said, Matt, I've never had this happen before. He goes, I go in, I talk to them about what their problems are, and 15 minutes in, they're asking me, what does my product do? Because I haven't talked about my product. I said I'm part of RIHub, I'm doing customer interviews, I'm trying to understand your industry. So he engaged them emotionally, and what wound up happening is they couldn't stand not knowing about what he was doing. And he went on to 12 interviews, and in all 12 interviews, he wound up with sales calls after the interviews that he was able to schedule, which was not the intent of the interviews, by the way. But I found it interesting that here's a sales guy, and a good sales guy, and he stops selling for 12 interviews. And what he finds out is he gets more sales calls if he stops selling. You know, it's an amazing thing to experience when that happens. So some of the things that I really want you to focus on: always gather background data. Always know who you're talking to. All this data is available. In our world, we can find out anything about anybody. I work with Chinese companies. I can find out how big Chinese companies are, who's running them. I mean, you can certainly find out how big a company here is, and that's important. It's important to you. It's important to them. And if the guy goes, well, my competitor, the Flyers are just beating me to death because I can't deliver this, you already knew that the Flyers were a competitor of theirs, and you can engage in a conversation, and you can ask questions, open-ended questions, and you can find out how you can help them solve a significant problem. One thing I should talk about just briefly is magnitude. We talk about magnitude in the customer discovery course. Simply put, there's 3 levels of magnitude. One level of magnitude is, mosquito bite. It's a thing nobody cares about. If a mosquito bites you, you might slap it, but at the same time, you might not if you're busy trying to fry a steak. Or a finger pinch. Gee, you got to put a Band-Aid on that. Yeah, it's bleeding. It's a problem, but it's not a problem. Or shark bite. If it's a shark bite, you have to solve that problem because it's going to kill you. So what you're trying to do within a customer segment that is a small group of customers is find a shark bite that you can solve with your technology or with your solution. And if you find a shark bite, you can establish a beachhead market because those people will buy what you have. But if all you're doing is trying to address mosquito bites, you will, pardon the pun, die from a death of 1,000 mosquito bites. You will not get the sales you're looking for. You will not get the market penetration you're looking for. And in the end, you will fail. And you will not fail quickly. You'll fail slowly, and it'll be excruciating. As I said, you should use an interview guide, and I'm making this available through RIHub. You can get a hold of Annette or I, and I'll send you the PDF of it. You have an interview plan. You take notes from the interview that you had, and then you sit down, and every 4 or 5 interviews, you review the reflection and synthesis, and you decide whether you're going to pivot on part of your product or part of your concept. Just some housekeeping. Interview, say hi, introduce who you are, your teammate, the roles interview. My teammate's going to be taking notes. Reiterate it's going to take 15 minutes. You're not going for 15 minutes, you're going for half an hour. But at the 15-minute time point, you need to check and say, do you mind if we continue? Give the person the option, because they may be sitting there gritting their teeth, dying to get rid of you, and you really don't want to make them upset because you'd like to be able to get back to them. You are not there to sell. And if somebody asks you for an NDA, you're in the wrong interview. You should not be asking anybody any question that's going to require a non-disclosure agreement. Conducting the interview, listen, conduct a time check. Always, always, always ask for a referral. is there someone you know who I should speak with, either in your organization or not? Is there a colleague that I should speak with? Should I, is there Joe in manufacturing? And then thank them for their insights and taking the time to meet, and remind them, would you mind if I were to call you later? I'm actually getting close to the end here. I'm not sure. Do we need to leave time for questions and answers? I'm looking to Annette or...
I think if people have questions, they can ask them in the chat. We don't have any at the moment, Matt, so you can keep going.
Okay.
But I'll be sure to pop in and let you know if we have any.
Cool. Anyway, identify the problems your customer is struggling with. That's your job. Think about their pain or gain. Is it a shark bite? Is it a mosquito bite? How can you go wrong? You can come up with a bad hypothesis. We all do it. You don't conduct enough interviews. Kind of a rule of thumb, and I hate to do this, consumer products, 100 interviews. Industrial products, 30 to 50. I mean, that may sound like a lot, but it's not. And you should come to enjoy this because it's informing you and it's ensuring your success. Last but not least, confirmation bias. You are the easiest person to fool. Don't fool yourself. This is the picture of the woman looking in the mirror and seeing herself as 20 years old. I've got another one of a guy looking in a mirror, doing the same thing. The bottom line is confirmation bias is huge. It's easy to fall into that trap, and you should avoid it at all costs. And last but not least, you should remember, if all that you have is a hammer, all of your problems will look like nails. So you need to formulate your questions carefully. So I'm going to get out of PowerPoint and get back to me and ask if there are any questions.
Folks, you can post your questions right in the chat. Hey, Matt, that was great. I have to tell you, I love this stuff. And I'll add my own personal experience to everything you've said. When you talk about magnitude, I like to talk about validating the validation. And there was a trick I used to use when I was at Salesforce, and we would sit with our customer advisory board called the dollar trick. And some of you out there know the dollar trick, and some of you don't know the dollar trick. So you would be either in a one-on-one interview or you'd be in a group interview with users and potential users, and they would tell you all the things that were important to them. And sometimes they would tell you this particular thing was the biggest pain in the world, that, oh my God, this was terrible. But if you took good notes and you noted everything that they said, and you said, here's $1. Of the things that you just noted, how much would you spend to solve each of these? And sometimes the thing they talk the most about, they might spend a nickel out of that dollar, and they were going to put 30 cents on something else that they didn't spend as much time talking about. It's in my theory, it's the validation of the validation. It's that last step that it's a simple exercise, but it's so wonderful. Matt, you have a question in the chat.
All righty, let's see here.
From Aaron Olson.
I can tell it to you, Matt, no worries. So, Matt, this person, Aaron, wants to know, you mentioned requesting 15 minutes for the interview, but then asking if the interviewee wants to continue longer than the 15-minute mark. If I'm scheduling interviews with people who have a full schedule, does that still apply? If I ask for 15 minutes, they'll likely schedule something else right after, and they have to leave, even though you want to talk some more. Is it okay if actually initially ask for longer than 15 minutes? Is that okay?
If you feel you want to do that, sure. My experience is people will not schedule anything within, if you get a 15-minute segment, they're basically going to allow 5 minutes on the front end and 5 minutes on the back end. And chances are they're not going to schedule something for another 15 minutes after your 15 minutes. And what you're trying to do is lower the barrier to entry for getting an interview. And if you ask for half an hour, the person mentally checks off 45 minutes. You ask for 15 minutes, the person mentally checks, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. You can't you can't really schedule another 15-minute block. At least this is my experience. So I'd say, well, if that's your hypothesis, go do some experimentation. See what happens. Ask for half an hour, ask for 15 minutes, see what your level of success is. 15 minutes is something most people will give you without thinking too hard. Half an hour, it's, oh my God, it's half an hour. So that's just my own personal experience.
I think that's great. And by the way, I also put in the chat where you can sign up for Matt's course. RIHub presents it every other month, basically. We're in the middle of one right now. We'll be doing one, I think, in early January. No charge to you, and it is an amazing value, I want to tell you. He also runs these in the evening so as not to bother what you're doing during the day. So it's a pretty terrific course.
So I'd like to add something that Adam Alpert put into the chat, in case everybody doesn't see it. He says, I always start off that I want to be sure to respect your time. Do you have a hard stop? That's a really good thing to do. I'm not sure I would do that. I don't do that because basically my own etiquette is if I go into a meeting, I tell somebody if I have a hard stop. So I make the assumption that if they don't say they have a hard stop, there's not a hard stop. But, it's, again, personal preference and experience. Thank you, Adam.